Okay, we're going to talk about this last slide, and then I'm going to get all these online and get them out there for you to start looking at, and then I'll work on the other ones the next couple of days and get several more up. You can see, as I mentioned, this is just a diagram that I hope will just be helpful to you. It's another model, another way of thinking. It's not necessarily truth. It's just a way of thinking about something. Think of it this way. As families move through time, okay, that would be your horizontal vector there, the blue line that goes from your left to right. As families move through time, they participate in what we would call developmental, normative and non-normative historical events. These are the normal developmental things that happen: being born, getting older, maybe finding a spouse, maybe having children, all of those sorts of things. The kind of things that are just what happens to people and what happens to families. Some of these are normative and some of these are non-normative. For example, I'm playing at a funeral tomorrow for a 15-year-old kid who committed suicide. Well, that's not a normative event for us. It's terribly non-normative, but it's not such a horrible, well, it's horrible, but of course, but it's not something that's completely unknown to us. It's something, unfortunately, that's become too common in our culture, and so it would be a non-normative developmental event. Someone dies tragically. That's non-normative sometimes, but it falls within that kind of thing that happens as we move through time. Okay. On the other hand, that suicide or something like it, an addiction, a horrible tragedy, a hurricane, someone moving to the other side of the world, those things could also be what we would call vertical stressors. They could kind of be things that kind of cross our developmental path like this and intersect so that we are a couple with 3 children, and then we learn that our spouse has an addiction to alcohol that's gotten completely out of control and is ruining our life. That we would probably know that before it was coming. But if that happens, then at the point where our developmental process, couple with 3 small children, say, intersects with that alcoholism, and those are the points when people in family ministry and in counseling tend to see folks show up to get help. We're in a difficult, maybe developmental pattern horizontally, and then something drops in on us vertically that explodes everything else, that turns being a normal family with 3 kids into what feels like a disaster to us, or what feels like this enormous crisis moment. You can see there on the slide it said where that crisis point happens, there's a quantum leap in anxiety. Everything seems horribly, horribly worse all at once. This can happen because we've just learned that we have to begin to take care of our aging parents, which is kind of in that horizontal spectrum toward the end. But then if I'm a 50-year-old guy and I learn that I've got to care for my aging mother, and I have some kind of economic disaster, I lose my job, that's a vertical stressor that drops in at that developmental point. And I have this intersection of caring for my aging parents. Now I've lost my job. I got a crisis point. I got a place where things are going to be really, really, really difficult. My anxiety is going to increase significantly. Those are the points where people show up in your office and say, we've got to have some help. So this is not truth. This is just a way of thinking. And you can use that any way you want to. I'm not sure exactly what things fall into which category, but I know that when I have people come in my office and they're in a crisis, very often it's because you've got 2 things that have intersected. Like the suicide that I mentioned, that we could think of that as a vertical vector. Here's a family, for example, who's moved a lot. They have a difficult time with transition into a new place. father starting a new job, lots of stuff like that going on. That's all kind of in the developmental normative process. And then the suicide of this child is this enormous vertical stressor that drops in on their family. So you can put whatever you want to in those different categories, but I think it's helpful to think in terms of these horizontal vertical stressors, particularly when someone's sitting in front of you asking for help. I think that begins to be a really helpful thing. And I want you to think about this, again, not so much in terms of just what happens to individuals, although you'll deal with individuals a lot, but I want you to think about this in terms of a family moving through this horizontal process and then having these vertical stressors come in. Okay? Not individuals, but families doing this exact process. Okay, so we're going to stop there right now. I'm going to let you deal with these videos and this much of the PowerPoint, and I'll get some other stuff up later.